Let's sing glory!
Today we're sitting down with freelance writer and deputy editor of Broccoli magazine, Ellen Freeman, as well as Sharada Tolton, graphic designer, product photographer, and art educator for persons with disabilities. I initially approached Ellen on the basis of discussing her written work and her current position at Broccoli magazine, but it soon turned into a trio convo that serendipitously has come out the other end in what I can only describe as an ode to friendship, and the ways in which theirs supports them on a personal and professional level. What started out as a mutual disinterest in their peers' gusto for biology, not to mention Sharada's innate styling of Dungarees, has led to the eventual co-founding of Muff, a biennial magazine of feminism and esoterics. I hope you lend us an ear, as once again, the friendship honed between ladies shows to be one of connection, collaboration, and sisterhood. This is You Can Always Add Your 2 Cents to Muff, with Ellen Freeman and Sharada Tolton. A quick heads up, we're dealing with an overseas conversation here, so the audio may reflect this. Coming to you from Mexico City, Oakland, California, and Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I'm pretty sure both of you guys are slashies in regards to the fact that you just do a lot. But if you could give our listeners some official labels, what it is exactly that you do.
Absolutely. So this is Sharada. Hello. And I live in Oakland, California, where I'm a graphic designer and product photographer for a beauty company called Illumino. My formal education is in teaching art and design. So I'm also a teaching artist at NIAD, which is an art center for people with disabilities in Richmond, California. So I teach there as well. I'm Ellen. I live in Mexico City, but I'm from Portland. I am a freelance writer and editor. So I write cultural stories for various online and print publications. And I make Muff with Sharada. And I also help edit a magazine called Broccoli.
Well, I thought we could kind of switch it up, and instead of having you describe yourself, if you could describe each other as friends and co-founders.
Ooh, what fun. Ooh. Yeah. Let's see. Ellen is... I think what I'm attracted to about Ellen, I think why I love Ellen is she has an extremely broad range of curiosities, and she feeds all that curiosity by always learning, always reading, taking in interesting archival media. And so whatever we've kind of decided on together as an area of interest, she can always fuel that with this amazing amount of cultural information.
She's like a walking encyclopedia.
Yeah. Wow, thanks, Sharada, because I feel like I know nothing. A true Zen mind. Yeah, I've eliminated it all. And Sharada, so Sharada creates the aesthetic of Muff, and this kind of amazing thing has happened where when we first started making this, I think I had in my mind what a zine looked like, and then Sharada came up with something that was a whole new species, and I felt like I had never seen anything like it before. And now I'm starting, this is, a year and a half later, now I'm starting to see this kind of aesthetic vernacular creeping up in little places, like little mold spores, and I'm pretty sure that Sharada is tapped into some kind of prophetic aesthetic zeitgeist. Cool. Wow. And that we're going to see this explosion, but that you'll know where it came from.
Yeah.
Nice spore metaphor. Thank you for that.
Wow. And what does the intuition mean to both of you?
I think we might have really different answers about that. Oh, can't wait to hear yours. So I guess for me it's just trusting that I have an understanding, or that I'm taking in information that's beyond what's immediately available to me rationally. Like the sum of my memories and connections, sensory experiences are always informing my sense of how the world works. And I'm an anxiety person, so I think for me, intuition is more of a hindsight kind of thing. Oh. And it's later when I realized that maybe something hasn't gone according to plan, but that I kind of knew that was going to happen all along, that I'll realize that my intuition had been there. So I think for me, it's something that that I'm kind of chasing after. Well, I used to believe that everything that I thought was a fact, and at some point that became insufferable. So I started opening to the possibility that what I believed to be intuition could actually be hunger, or jealousy, or resource scarcity. So I think that when you have that kind of process of of distrusting the internal monologue, then you kind of have to eventually rebuild the trust with that inner voice, and kind of try to parse the hunger messaging from the heart messaging. So I think that's where I am right now with intuition.
And are there any things you're currently trying to implement in your daily life that would bridge this gap between you and your intuition?
I think it's just like pattern finding. Like when I think that you can ultimately boil down the voices to like fear and maybe love. I'm just stealing that idea from a friend who told me that. But and so I think that the ones that I think when you start listening, I'm starting to be able to figure out which ones are fear-based messages. And so noticing those patterns that feel, I don't know, like every time I have a deadline, I have like a week of no sleep and no friends, where it's like, you'll never get this done. And I used to think that was my like practical intuition, helping me to stay on top of my tasks. But I'm starting to, after a few years of that pattern, starting to see it as a fear message.
It's totally fine if you don't want to share, but do you perhaps maybe know where this might stem from?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, doesn't it all come from our moms?
Blame the parents.
I don't want to blame my mom in particular, but just moms. Someone's mom. Someone's mom. Aww.
And Sharada, I noticed that you were pretty like straightforward with your answer and what your intuition means to you. And I'd love to kind of know the ground basis as to how perhaps your intuition came to be and your relationship with it. Did it stem from your own childhood, your parents, or were there certain factors that contributed to it as you went into your career and kind of matured?
I think of Sharada as a very naturally intuitive person. Empathetic, like intuitive internally, but also externally. Externally intuitive, that's cool. Yeah, intuitive about other people and environments and situations. I'm actually a psychic medium. No, I don't identify as that. It's great when people do, but I don't. I guess I have always I've always felt connected with my intuition, even from youth. I was raised in a household that was like kind of weirdly philosophy based. Lots of conversations about the universe at the dinner table. Often to the neglect of like mundane details about just like, you know, preserving the family finances and that kind of thing. We always had our eye on the bigger picture, and so I think while I've got a big family, and while a lot of my siblings have like rejected that, instead I've just internalized all of it. So I continue to be a person who has a hard time like managing my taxes, but I'm always aware of my place, like in the cosmos, in the greater web of beings.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like your family definitely gave you that space to just develop.
Right. Once again, moms.
Yeah.
Moms, there you go.
The power ladies.
Love you, Mom.
It seems that both of you have known each other from quite early on. When did you guys actually meet?
We met in college. Freshman year. Yeah. We went to a small school outside of Philadelphia, and it was kind of, at the time, I mean, I think it's grown tremendously since then, but at the time it felt a little bit like an aesthetic desert. Like, like nobody wanted to talk about anything other than biology there. And so we formed this very unfortunately narrow group of friends, and kind of fiercely clung to them because we perceived each other as creative people, I guess.
You guys
I
are
think
just
Sharada
like,
came onto my radar for two reasons. And one was that we both tried out for the same improv group, and I was not accepted, and Sharada was. And she was also the only person in our age bracket back then who wore overalls.
Oh, wow.
wow.
Yeah. Which
Again,
now,
prophetic
I think
imagination.
Now it's like every basic girl's got her dungarees, but...
And you guys both decided to go to Japan around, like right after college. Was it kind of like a gap year?
Yeah, I think it was...
Ellen went first.
Yeah, it was my idea.
You dragged her along with you?
I think it was more of like that, what do you do after college kind of thing.
And for both of you, was Japan sort of that figuring out process?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I had been living in Philadelphia at the time, and working at a school, and was feeling myself being kind of hemmed in, that I was watching my sense of what I could do next with my career and do next socially, like become more pigeonholed and narrower. And so I was really attracted to the idea of a full context switch.
I think it was partly kind of like an escapist sojourn for 3 years for me. Like a putting off of making decisions about being an adult while like having this veneer of professionality. But I had been freelance writing a little bit in college. So I worked at a school where I had to be at my desk from like 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, regardless of whether I had classes or like even really whether school was in session. And so I had to find something to do during that time when I wasn't like lesson planning or making like a Carpenter song bingo boards. But I started writing stories for some like women's fashion websites that kind of interpreted things that I found interesting about Japanese culture for an American audience. So that's really when I started, like, feeling like I could be taken seriously as a writer, maybe. And then I knew when we eventually decided to leave, I knew that was what I wanted to focus on when we came back.
Was it the same for you, Sharada? That tying in that experience in Japan, did that contribute to your end goal of, like, what's going to happen next?
It absolutely did. I would say that I had been kind of visually dormant for I don't know, 7 years or something. I'd been really interested in visual art in high school, and then I became like a true try-hard academic student for a while, and kind of let that go. But when I was in Japan, because of I was just so attracted to illustration there, to kind of the intention that's put into like any space or any sensory experience, whether it's like going to a cafe, the presentation of the carefully thrown mug and like 2 almonds on a plate next to your cup of coffee. I think for me it would have been impossible not to be inspired by that. So it was while I was in Japan that I started drawing again, that I started being more interested in design, and that's when I decided to go back to school and get my master's in teaching art and design. I came to visit Sharada's apartment in Japan, and she had a lot of extra space, and in this like office room she had constructed this giant diorama in clay and like things from the Japanese dollar store, which is an amazing crafter's resource, of Adam and Eve in Eden with like little clay fig leaves, and it had like a little light display that you could turn on. It was really amazing. Entirely, I would say, yeah, that was definitely rooted in my experience in Japan. That could not have existed in an American closet.
I'd love to know how each of you guys have both played into each other's careers before Muff and leading up to Muff.
I mean, it was pretty serendipitous, actually, because that same visit for New Year's, I met, so Sharada's boyfriend at the time, his brother's girlfriend were also visiting, and she worked for the women's fashion website that I ultimately ended up writing about Japan for, and she mentioned, like, people love Japan, you should write about Japan, and I had never really thought of that before. So if it weren't for Sharada, I wouldn't have done that.
I'm incredibly well connected. I'd say Ellen hasn't really helped me at all either in my career.
There are a lot of opportunities I've been withholding.
Yeah, Ellen's a real like sort of experience hoarder, I would say, and she's been leaving all of those opportunities for herself. No, I think it's more of like a sort of spiritual inspiration. Ellen's always like my ideal reader for something, I would say. Like if Ellen finds this like extremely niche humor nugget of mine funny, it's like enough for me. So yeah, I would say in my more creative stuff, Ellen as a platonic ideal has been very important. The ideal of Ellen is more important than like the real Ellen.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because I was about to say I think I'm an ideas man, whereas Sharada's more of a get her done kind of gal, get her done gal. And nice. So like when Muff was just the apple in our eye, we were like really excited about it. But like for me, just getting excited about something is usually enough. And then Sharada actually wanted to do it. So
she was like, let's take the reins on this one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Sharada's kind of the whip cracker in terms of making sure that things actually come to fruition. That's nice.
You both compliment each other really well.
Oh, thanks. I just really like Ellen, so it's easy.
But Sharada, I read that you described Muff as a biannual magazine of feminism and esoterics, and how have you both approached its physical publication in relation to the esoterical content you're publishing? Because, say, reaching out to the demographic you're catering towards, and more often than not, you're hearing people say, print is dead. How do you find a balance in this?
Well, I mean, we're operating as a small press, and I think that what we're doing, we're not really interested in reaching a mass audience, and actually within our niche audience readership, print is not dead. I think print is experiencing this incredible renaissance, really. I think artist books are one of the more exciting media out there right now. And so that's certainly something that's like a mantra that's being shared a lot right now, that print is dead, but at the same time we're seeing more art book fairs and more prominent artists like reaching toward print media that I think we have in recent memory. So it's cool to be a part of that, and cool to be a part of this like small press revolution. And how esoteric content relates to that. I think that it's exciting for us to be tapping into this, again, like spiritual renaissance zeitgeist that's happening right now, that I think especially with what we see being shared on social media, that people are less interested in what has been kind of factually or like scientifically agreed upon right now, and instead, or at least things that have been exclusively thought of in that way, and more just thinking about finding a path for yourself and making meaning out of things based on your own very specific experiences. And so we're kind of trusting that trend that we're seeing in the way that people are expressing themselves. And we're providing a space for those voices. We're allowing people to think about, to kind of explore the phenomena of our world from a less rational scientific perspective in Muff.
Where does Muff stem from in regards to your own intuition, both professionally and personally?
Well, I think for a while now I've been really attracted to the sort of speculative fiction brand of feminism, and also kind of separately, I've always been attracted to self-help rhetoric and propaganda. And so it's felt like this extended kind of love poem to kind of using that language and that visual aesthetic for exploring contemporary issues, media, phenomena.
I think it just came out of both of us noticing this renaissance of things that when we were kids or even teens would have been super freaky, being kind of accepted or like commodified by people our age, like a witchiness or astrology or energy healing or crystals or, anything anything that would have been found at the Renaissance bookshop in Portland. I don't know, new Renaissance bookshop. Talking a lot about that, but also talking about how there were a lot of parts of the culture that came out of that maybe didn't need to make it into this Renaissance. And wanting to kind of ground that interest in the contemporary world. And then also talking about women's magazine, self-help propaganda, like Sharada said, and the kind of patronizing tone that we use even to talk to ourselves in that space. And reframe, having a space that could reframe that. Yeah, I think in the version, in the kind of original New Age, the way that we thought about our spirituality was very connected to this kind of self-seeking purity, and even related to like health and beauty, in this way that's like kind of funnily directed at women, and so we're trying to parse those influences and be like, wait, in what ways does the spiritual seeker's path like actually have to do with how wide our pores are? Does it make any sense that this is the way that it's been packaged for us in the past?
Exactly. Within the spectrum, anything that you guys are leaning towards right now? Something that would definitely raise some eyebrows.
Well, we're working on our animal issue. So some of the themes we've been talking about are cages, domestication, humanimality, lizard people, pet psychics. Really anything to kind of disrupt the anthropocentric perspective.
Has there ever been any backlash within the community of Muff towards the subjects that you're talking about?
Something that immediately comes to mind is recently I had posted like a video of a police dog calendar, which was so bizarre. It was like painting these like cops as heroes, and specifically framed that way and framed as more caring, more human, because they were posing next to their great big dogs. And so I had posted this kind of thing, like asking how we perceive the dogs in the police dog role, and which is something that I haven't encountered that kind of conversation before. So it's totally new territory, and not entirely as a backlash, as an angry way, but we got a lot of responses from people coming from their own really specific cultural context, saying things like the dogs are still cops, or the dogs are victims. They're victims of like Stockholm syndrome, and to blame the dogs is victim blaming. And but I think that we managed it well, despite all of the different like kind of feelings and perspectives coming up, and that what instead kind of
instead came out of it was that that looking at it from the dog's perspective was a new way of considering our relationship to police and our communities.
I think it ended up being a dialogue, too, because we asked people if we could screenshot and share their responses in our Instagram story, and I think everyone was down. And then people were responding to each other.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like, say, more than, as you said, a backlash. It's definitely a community that's opened up a dialogue and allows for contribution and the further education on these subjects, which I love that it's like you're putting these subjects out there and talking about the subject matter, but there's always room for its development and to further add on to the conversation.
I think that's been really important to us, for it to feel like a porous community that you can always add your 2 cents to Muff.
And in terms of publishing, is Muff self-published? What does that process look like when it comes to sourcing content and printing and the eventual distribution?
It starts out, it's kind of an evolving process because we're on our 3rd issue now, but it starts out usually with us just talking about a theme amongst ourselves and then kind of musing on that for a while and opening that up to writers we know, artists we know, and then people we don't know via Instagram, and generating themes that might be thought-provoking, and then allowing people to submit their ideas, but also reaching out to people whose work we like and giving them maybe a little prompt and seeing if they might be interested, and gathering all the content that way.
I'm also interested in hearing how you tackle sustainability and ethicality, and in regards to the merchandise along with the publication. How do you guys handle that?
We've always been really, really adamant that we wouldn't use any plastic in our packaging. And I think it was nice that from early on we decided that. I mean, our first issue was about stuff. It was themed stuff, and it was kind of about waste and excess and our relationship to materialism. So it would have seemed, I think it would have been a very clear, like, transgression of our values if we had then, like, packaged up the print in, like, bubble wrap and sent it out to our readers. So it was good to have that specific reason for a kind of to stay close to sustainability early on, and as we've scaled up marginally, we've kept that as a core value. But then beyond just sustainability, we've also tried to adhere to some kind of I would say visual ethics, or even like textual ethics as well. Our last issue was about the body, and we had a lot of conversations among just each other about what kind of imagery was appropriate to share. Because even when people are generating their own content about their bodies, like I think it's not in every case self-aware, and in some cases it can feel like a self-exploitation, and we were really careful to look for a visual line that we felt comfortable with, that was portraying bodies from a place of possibility rather than just rehearsing old kind of body negative tropes.
Has there ever been a time where you felt that maybe there were certain subjects that you kind of put out there in a way that it was set in stone, or there wasn't, say, further room for discussion, and you didn't take the perspective of, say, someone who's on the other side of the spectrum into consideration, and that it was definitely a learning process.
Well, I think, because part of what this is supposed to be is a group of voices rather than just us. Our process of finding artists and writers has had to be honed over time, and they're very real barriers in finding diverse voices, and so over time we've had to do a lot of reflection on how can we get a true how can we get true diversity into this publication? And I don't think we've arrived at a perfect version of it yet, and I think it's going to continue to take a lot. But that's one way that it feels like it feels like we're still in process.
In terms of self-publishing, what advice would you give to those looking to go down this route?
I think our biggest challenge right now, just in terms of being able to keep the project going, is finding a way to fund it. So we've basically just been self-funding. And I don't know if that's advice. I don't think there's advice I can give about that, but we've actually it's been really helpful for us to talk to other self-publishers at Zine Fest and art book fairs about how they do it. Yeah, I guess I don't have advice to give, but I would say that that's something to consider.
Yeah, reach out to those within your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that tapping into community is really important with self-publishing. Usually I'm the kind of person who has over 10 projects cooking, and very few of them actually ever get finished. But with Muff, since we've had, first off, Ellen and I have a collaborative relationship, so we have to kind of hold each other accountable. But then also we have a network of contributors and readers and other people who are just kind of peers within the self-publishing community. And so they kind of hold us accountable as well. We have this kind of compact that we set that will produce an issue within this amount of time, and it's going to have a certain intention behind its content, and so that's very motivating. It keeps the project going.
And in closing, I'd love to know what Muff has brought to both of your lives, what elements it's contributed, and just as you said, Sharada, that you kind of see it as this extension, it's this love note, how you're kind of looking at Muff right now and being like, wow, I never expected this to derive from this project and that it would affect me in this way.
I think for me it is that community that Sharada is talking about, because I've always thought of writing and creating as a pretty isolated exercise. Even just sharing my work with others is not ideal for me. And so finding people who are having the same conversations, who are interested in the same things, and who are also creating has been really eye-opening for me, really welcoming. I think for me it's been important to create a space for exploring ideas. Since we do different themes each issue, and we have this kind of ever broadening base of contributors. It's not, the form is evolving, and it feels very fun to have a space for whatever I'm kind of processing at the time to appear, either in the content that we put on Instagram, or if it's like a full article in Muff, or something that just appears in footnotes, that there's this specific, or this object kind of archive of what we're processing at the time.
This is Ellen.
And this is Sharada.
Guts and Glory signing off.
This was You Can Always Add Your 2 Cents to Muff with Ellen Freeman and Sharada Tolton. Refer to the show notes to further get to know our guests. Share your thoughts and show us some love by subscribing or get in touch to be featured on the podcast. Released every other Monday. Thanks for lending us an ear. Passing on the mic.